A submerged container grabbed headlines when local researchers stumbled upon an unusual metallic object resting deep on the ocean floor. At first glance, it seemed like an ordinary shipping container, but what lay inside was far from ordinary. As their diving robot unearthed it and the heavy door creaked open, a wave of shock swept over the crew, leaving them pale with disbelief. The buoy that picked up the most tremors was about 20 meters from the shore. When Zoe and her team arrived, they got straight to work. Zoe, being the lead researcher, always dove in first. At the bottom of the ocean, she saw a huge shipping container, but it was clear she couldn't lift the heavy metal object by herself. When she came back up, she quickly called for the ship's diving robot to help. "Let's get it onto the boat," she said firmly. Luckily, they had come prepared. Their ship was equipped with advanced tools, and Zoe knew how to use them. Following her orders, her team got the drone ready to dive deep. The ship had a crane that could lift heavy objects, but even so, this simple shipping container made the machine struggle. The boat rocked back and forth, even taking on some water as they lifted the container out of the sea. After a lot of effort and some worried looks, they finally got the mysterious container onto the deck with a loud thud. The whole crew quickly gathered to see what they had found. A shipping container usually isn't watertight, so when lifted from the ocean floor, one might expect water to leak out of every hole. Strangely, that wasn't the case here. Everyone awaited Zoe's command. After a few deep breaths, she decided it was time to open it. "But do it slowly," she ordered. Using a large bolt cutter, they cut off the main lock, and afterward, the door handles were pulled aside. When the door finally swung open, everyone turned pale. No one could have predicted this bizarre discovery, and Zoe herself was the most shocked. She stood transfixed by what she saw inside the metallic vessel. No one said anything at first, though they had speculated about the container's contents. No one had expected this. Zoe was the first to break the silence. "What is this? Did someone live here?" she asked, her voice full of disbelief. The contents were strangely homely, but none of her colleagues had an answer. The inside of the container was fully furnished. There was a bed, a couch, a closet, a table with chairs, everything a regular household might have. Zoe was not only surprised by the furnishing, but also by the fact that everything was still in place. They quickly discovered that everything was nailed to the floor. They searched every inch of the container, but found nothing that brought them closer to the truth. Zoe let out a frustrated sigh and was about to give up when one of her colleagues let out an excited yell. She turned to see him holding a plastic Ziploc bag. What sparked his excitement was what was inside, a recorder of some kind. Zoe handled the bag cautiously, worried that any wrong movement might cause damage. The bag had been carefully stowed away, and when she opened it, she noticed that the device inside was still dry. This was a good sign, and she pressed play with cautious optimism. It was hard to hear the recording out in the middle of the ocean, so the group quickly moved inside. At first, they heard only background noise, but then a voice came through clearly. "I need to record this before they notice we are here and capture us," it said, responding to someone in the background. The voice sounded panicked, making the first sentence in the recording all the more ominous. There was a brief silence before the man cleared his throat and introduced himself as AA. "I hope someone finds this container and this recording and can help. Lives are at stake." The voice hurriedly continued, but the recording suddenly cut off. Zoe looked at her colleagues, who all shared the same expression, a look of disbelief and confusion. What had they gotten themselves into? What was going on? The message sounded disturbing, and they wanted to help, but how? Then, the recording suddenly resumed. Zoe moved closer to hear more clearly. "We are in desperate need of assistance. We are on the Evercargo Voyager, but I don't know for how long," the voice said. And then, the recorder stopped again. Zoe tried to get it to work, but her efforts were in vain. The device was broken. The room fell silent, and they were all speechless. Then, Zoe remembered something. The ship had been sighted multiple times, but only seemed to dock briefly, refueling and moving minimal cargo despite being filled with containers. Zoe frowned inwardly. Why would a ship carrying shipping containers dock so infrequently and not load or unload its cargo? This odd behavior greatly confused her and raised some red flags. She reviewed the log database again, hoping to find more information about the vessel. Suddenly, she exclaimed when she noticed its last known location. It was close. Zoe made sure everyone on board understood the situation and she was relieved to see they all shared her concerns. She gave the captain the coordinates of the ship's last known location. When they arrived, they were surprised to find the vessel floating just 20 kilometers from the coast, seemingly abandoned. Why was it just sitting there? While Zoe and her team were curious, they were also worried about getting too close. "I'll call the Coast Guard and police," Zoe said firmly. She made sure their research ship stayed out of sight when the authorities arrived. Once the officers boarded, Zoe quickly explained the situation and showed them the recording they had found. She was glad the police took her seriously, but there was a big problem. The ship's odd behavior suggested they were trying to stay unnoticed, and if they saw the officers coming, they might refuse to let them aboard. They needed a plan. Fortunately, Zoe thought of one. The police officers could borrow some of the research crew's clothing and approach the ship in disguise. They were less likely to turn away a group of scientists. "You can say we're investigating fish migration in the area and that their ship is in a prime position for us to take some readings," Zoe suggested. Her heart pounded as she and two police officers approached the container ship using a small dinghy stored on the back of the research vessel. When they got close, Zoe requested permission to board, but she immediately sensed that something was off. The captain didn't invite them on right away, and Zoe had to make a real effort to convince him that she and the officers were scientists. Meanwhile, the captain gave orders to his crew, and there was a lot of activity on the ship. After half an hour of waiting, they finally got a response. The crew lowered a ladder, allowing the trio to climb aboard. "You have 1 hour," the captain said, before ordering everyone back to work. Zoe smiled and did her best to act as though she were taking scientific readings. She and the officers wandered around the ship, trying to discover what was really going on while being as inconspicuous as possible. But there was nothing immediately suspicious. They had likely used the last half hour to hide any evidence. Out of desperation, Zoe began to whisper the man's name. "Travis, are you here?" She repeated it a few times as they walked between containers. Suddenly, one of the containers beside them opened, and they were pulled inside, the door closing quickly behind them. To their surprise, the container was filled with people. But it wasn't just people. The interior was furnished, much like the container they had recovered from the ocean. "Who are you?" a man demanded. Zoe recognized him from the photos and the recording. She stepped forward and explained who they were and that they had found his recording. The man, Travis, explained that he and others had sought passage to a safe country, hearing rumors of a ship helping people escape. However, once aboard, they were forced to work, with their stay continually extended. Travis had been trapped for 2 years, and some for even longer, living in terrible conditions. He tried to lead a rebellion, but the crew discovered his plan, destroyed his container home, and tossed it overboard. Before that, he managed to hide a recorder, hoping someone would find it. Shocked by his story, Zoe and the officers took swift action. They called for backup and executed a surprise raid, arresting the crew and securing the ship. Zoe helped free the trapped families, and the ship docked at a nearby city where the victims received care. The story quickly made national headlines, and Zoe felt proud to have been part of the rescue.